I also want to, I forgot to thank KBOI in Tucson has had me on for 22 years, KKNT The Answer 960 for 22 years. Thanks to all of you who listen to those two stations. Now Ryan Prescott, director of stage, and thank you.
And one other little promo. AZ Action Forum is the hashtag. If you're tweeting today, AZ Action Forum.
That's important. And Hewitt is easy to spell. Second question.
Here it is not.
Cathy's never I get it wrong. Second question, I'll start this time with Jim McGuire. Why are you best positioned of the 5 candidates running to beat Mark Kelly in November?
Well, I think this election is always going to be about character and courage, and the ability to go out, meet the voters where they're at, understand that you as a U.S. Senator are no greater or lesser than any other member of the team. I have a 38-year history of serving this country, and in character and courage you, I would remind all of the people here today that there is one candidate that's not here. It takes a lot of courage to face you. We can disagree about ideas, but you need to face the voters. You need to face the voters. Now, the character part is about what we've been doing. And when I go to the border and see what's happening, it's framed by 20 years of being there operationally, providing guardsmen to our great law enforcement entities, especially on the federal side, understanding how to both operationalize the problem, how to pass legislation to get the problem fixed, and how to appropriate money to make it happen. And all through this, I've worked hard to remind people that ultimately when you go to the polls, you have to decide who is in the best position to take on a large standing army and oppressive taxation, the two things Hamilton and Jefferson agreed on were the greatest threat.
Thank you, General. Justin?
Well, thank you so much for that very important question, and that's why I'm in this race. You know, this is a lot of hard work. It's hard for my family. I'm the father of 9 children, and this is something that is a significant sacrifice. But at the end of the day, I asked myself, you know, if Mark Kelly wins re-election, I'm going to have to live with the rest of my life asking myself, would it have been different had I gotten into this race? And I'll tell you why I'm the candidate that can beat Mark Kelly. I'm the only candidate on this stage who has won a statewide election. I currently serve as your Arizona Corporation Commissioner, and I won an election against challenging odds. Democrat Tom Steyer funded my Democrat opponent to the tune of $4 million. I was outspent by more than 30 to 1. And this was in a year in 2018 when many of our Republican candidates fell short. And I was successful. And you know why I was successful? Because I have a proven record of serving with the highest standards of ethics and integrity. And voters saw in me someone who is earnestly striving to do what is best for Arizonans. I've got a proven conservative record legislating for you. In the state legislature, I cut your income taxes. I balanced the state budget. I defunded Planned Parenthood. I voted to ban ballot harvesting. I funded the border strike force. There's no other candidate in this race with this proven record of conservative successes.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, Patriots, there's one on this stage that is a job creator. I am not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I am not a government worker. I'm a veteran, 6-year Army paratrooper, as well as a job creating thousands of jobs across the country, including here in Arizona. Also, from an endorsement standpoint, all of the Arizona Police Association have endorsed our campaign. The National Border Patrol Council has endorsed this campaign, and as many of you saw at the door, Brandon Judd here with me in support of our campaign. All of them. Why is that? These guys are fearful of what's happening on our border. Everything that I do in the Senate on day one until we get that southern border closed is I will do everything in my power, include the best legal talent I will bring to the table, is to secure that southern border. Additionally, guys, money in Washington is extremely corruptive. I'm the one candidate up here who is not taking lobbyist dollars. I am not taking PAC dollars. No one is funding this campaign except myself and the great people of Arizona and this nation in small dollar donations. I'm going there to be a fighter for you in the U.S. Senate.
You know, we have a lot of supporters. The less applause, the more questions. Blake Master.
Yeah, I mean, I bring a youthful energy and a different perspective to the U.S. Senate. I think it's so badly needed. You know, I've succeeded at the highest levels in business, and I've been involved in politics for a number of years. I was minorly involved in the Trump campaign in 2016. My boss at the time and mentor, Peter Thiel, saw something in Trump. He said, that guy's going to win, and I'm going to back him. So we got involved, and I got to join President Trump's transition team. And when I did that, I met so many congressmen and senators, actually, for the first time in my life. And I realized, while some of these people are impressive personally, and some aren't, actually, most of them, even the impressive ones, they did not have a beat on why Trump won, right? And I just realized, as this 30-year-old guy, I understood where Republicans had been deficient. For the past 20 or 30 years, we've just elected sort of rhino zombie-like Republicans that only want to play defense. They don't want to play offense. But it's like, I've got 3 young kids. I want to make sure there's a country recognizable as the United States in 30 years. And so it's time for a new generation of politicians that knows the stakes, that wants to get in there and play offense. And that, I promise you, is what I'll do as a U.S. Senator.
Cathi.
Within the next few months, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to decide whether or not to overturn Roe versus Wade. Do you want them to overturn Roe? Why or why not? And we'll start this one with Justin.
Thank you so much for that critical question. This is the most important decision that the United States Senate can make, is a decision to defend life. You know, and I'm the only candidate here with a record. I've had a 100% voting record in support of life. In the state legislature, I sponsored legislation to defund Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood receives 40% of its budget from your tax dollars. I did not think it was right that your tax dollars, yours and mine, should be subsidizing the abortion industry and ending the lives of the most innocent among us. So I'm absolutely going to stand firm in defending and championing a Supreme Court justice who will overturn Roe. We can do it in our lifetime. We will see the end of Roe.
Yeah, I absolutely hope they overturn Roe. You know, it's been a 50-year disaster. Millions and millions of lives were taken. But here's the thing. Most candidates will actually just go on defense. They'll say, yeah, we want to overturn Roe, and then leave the issue to the states. And this is what I mean when I say defense is insufficient. That's insufficient. We've got to play offense. We need to overturn Roe. It's bad policy. It's bad constitutional law. But we can't just leave the issue to the states, right? Do you think Oregon or California should permit Planned Parenthood to sever spinal cords and dismember babies at 8 months in the womb? Because I don't think that should be legal. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees all American persons the right to life, liberty, and property. Now, little babies in the womb don't have property yet, but gosh, they have life and liberty, right? And it's hard to imagine a greater deprivation of liberty than having your spinal cord severed before you get a chance to be born. My wife and I had a home birth recently, 2 years ago, and I caught my son, my 3rd son. And you know, what a feeling that is. And I caught the baby and handed it to his mama. And later that day I got to thinking, obviously I just met that kid for the first time, but the left wants to tell me that 20 minutes before I caught him, he wasn't a human being? No, I don't think so. We need a federal personhood law, and that's what playing offense looks like.
Yeah, Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided. It was wrongly decided. Life begins at conception, and this is clearly a states' rights issue. And what I want to say about the broader issue is I have moved to a position where I realize that the radical left has lost all compassion for life. In the summer of '85, I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy. I was getting ready to jump out of a perfectly good aircraft. I twisted my ankle. I couldn't continue. They made me a dorm manager for the Special Olympics. Now listen, in 2018, the New York Times author wrote that we should end, in her words, the scourge of Down syndrome by having prenatal testing and compulsory abortion. And she was lauded by the left. Well, listen, folks, for 38 years, I was willing to lay my life on the line for each of you. If you're not willing to stand for that, because you will eliminate happiness in the world if you allow this nation to have compulsory abortion for prenatal defects. And Blake and the rest are right. There has to be guardrails put in at the federal level, and it goes right back to the states, and let the people decide that issue.
am pro-life. I'm very glad my mother was. And I think everyone in here is. And we owe that to our fellow Americans. Again, you'll see numerous awards that I've received for support of pro-life here in the state. I've marched, I've supported those. But in addition, I've supported those who need another choice. The female, the mother who's going through an unwanted pregnancy decision. There's another option for adoption. Worked hard to make sure they know that option is available. And it is across the state, way more than Planned Parenthood. Obviously, never should we allow a single precious taxpayer dollar to go to Planned Parenthood or any abortion in this country or any taxpayer dollar going externally. I'll obviously vote against that and push against that in U.S. Senate. But moreover, is to give the ladies that choice that they're going through, which has got to be excruciating, and to give them that ability. Because adoptions, we know there's not enough beautiful babies to fulfill all the need here in the country. People are going around the world looking for them. We should be able to fulfill that need here at home.
Thank you. We'll start with Blake at this point. Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin saved the legislative filibuster. Senator Kelly wanted to end it. If you were elected to the United States Senate, will you defend the legislative filibuster or vote to end it if the Republicans are in the majority?
I'll defend it. I'm a fan of the filibuster, and actually I think it's a matter of principle. It also net benefits Republicans. Like, we have a commonsensical agenda, right? Look at this America First agenda. It means reducing immigration. The correct amount of illegal immigration is 0. It means stopping trying to democratize Afghanistan and Iraq and instead getting serious on China, right? It means having law and order, low taxes, a business environment. That's a common sense agenda, and I'm optimistic that in the next couple of years we can get 60 votes for it, right? The left needs to nuke the filibuster because their agenda is so crazy. They'll never get 60 votes for this stuff. They want to add D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to federalize elections. That's why they're so hell-bent on nuking the filibuster. They need to do it. We don't need to do it. And it's a huge safeguard, right? And actually, I'm not in the habit of praising Democrats too much, but thank goodness for Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. And hey, look, it's possible to praise them too much. Okay, Sinema's still a left-wing Democrat. Don't get me wrong. We got to get rid of her in 2024. When I win and get into the Senate, maybe one of these guys can get rid of Sinema in 2024. But props to her, credit where it's due. She liked this voting rights, so-called Voting Rights Act, but not enough to nuke the filibuster, and that deserves some respect.
Jim, you get to go second.
I do support the filibuster. Of course, if there was a way where we could have it when we're in and they couldn't, that'd be even better. But let's think practically, and that is that this is supposed to be a deliberative body that says it stops all the radical stuff coming through. That's the way the Constitution was set up. One of the core principles, as a business guy, for example, the strategy. The strategy of our country is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. My goal, guys, is not only preserve filibuster, but get the federal government back in a little bitty box. These guys are overreaching tremendously. We've got to look at other things that all of these agencies that are going crazy. Filibuster is one, but there's everyday consequences that are happening in many other ways beyond the filibuster. And that is the federal government is way overfunded. $4 trillion we send is more than plenty. Prioritize. Get the federal government out of our face. And for God's sakes, I cannot say it enough, number one for me, and always will be, secure the southern border.
Justin.
Yes, thank you so much for that critical question. I think that Mark Kelly revealed his true colors, right? He's tried to lay low, fly under the radar, but he has demonstrated that he is a rubber stamp for the radical left and their woke agenda. The fact that he is voting to blow up the filibuster, the extraordinary history of the Senate, as our founding fathers intended it to be this cooling cauldron for the radical legislation by the People's House to cool off and be debated, and then only the most appropriate and correct legislation would pass. And what is he blowing up this history of the filibuster for? For the Freedom to Cheat Act. Right, to tell us that we cannot have voter ID mandates here in our state so that they can cheat, they can overtake the elections, so that they can pack the Supreme Court, so that they can make Puerto Rico and DC a state. And we would never be able to win another election again. So yes, thank goodness for Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And thank goodness for the founding fathers and the Constitution who set up this bicameral body in order to protect the liberties established in our Constitution. I'll support the filibuster, and I'll support our Constitution and limiting the federal government.
General.
Absolutely. We have to protect the filibuster. George Washington told us, 86 years before Karl Marx was born, he feared tyranny of the majority far worse than he feared tyranny of the individual. Think about that. If you do not believe in the divine inspiration of this nation, explain to me how a guy that lived 86 years before Karl Marx decided to tell people that. Tyranny of the majority is a real thing, and the last brick in the wall holding back the radical left from taking control of your children, your thought, your resources, and your gunpowder is the filibuster. We will win the war of ideas. We will win a 60-seat majority. Do not run to the idea that you will fix this overnight. There's one thing we will do when I win the United States Senate in 2022. We will use reconciliation. I will be the 51st vote. We will secure the funding for the wall. We will build it, surveil it, and enforce it.
But when you interview a judicial nominee for the Supreme Court, what will you look for in character and qualifications? Is there a justice that you would look to as a model for the type of judicial nominee you would want to support? And we'll start with, who are we starting with this time? Jim. Excuse me? Okay, Justin, well, I called on you.
Because I think today we're looking at Clarence Thomas as being the leader of the conservative value of the America First movement. The fact that the Constitution, again, spells out this country and what its strategy and what we can and can't do in a legislative or executive branch. It's a matter of getting back to that principle. And as many people I've met on the campaign trail obviously agree very strongly with that. I've actually had a few that didn't. I've offered to them for a one-way ticket to Venezuela. Let them go live that life for 5 years. I've been to China. I've seen how brutal that regime is. The Supreme Court, like the filibuster, has been somewhat of a speed bump for some of this craziness. And fortunately, because I, everyone on the stage, most in this room, supported President Trump, I've also given, in terms of, from a financial standpoint, because I could, even before I ever thought about getting in this race, I spent millions of dollars to support conservatives, Arizona State Legislature, Congress, and Trump. None of my other worthy competitors, including Bernabich, well, Bernabich have given zero, except Bernabich did give $12,000 to himself. Millions, guys, to elect conservatives so that we can have today what we have in the Supreme Court.
Nick?
So the test that I would consider every time I'm considering a confirmation of a judge is, do they understand Antonin Scalia's understanding of original intent versus original meaning? I tell people I'm Antonin Scalia dressed up in a different outfit. The Constitution does not always break your way. The Constitution does not always break your way. Think back to my discussion earlier about no constitutional remedy to more than 270 electoral votes. Antonin Scalia reminded us about all of these paradoxes that exist in law. But it's clear to me on its face, original meaning is the most important way the judiciary will continue to protect the greatest country in the history of the world. And obviously, every single judge that comes before me must understand that the rights of the unborn are just as important as the rights of those of us sitting in this room today. You would not be in this room if you were not once unborn. So that's the test I would take, and I look at Antonin Scalia as the model and the original meaning theory to continue to look at judges.
Justin?
Yeah, thank you so much for that important question. You know, I remember well the day when I saw the news that Antonin Scalia had passed away, and my heart broke. We all remember Barack Obama was president at the time, and I was terrified about the future of our country by losing the Supreme Court and this tremendous justice who had defended the Constitution. That's who I'm going to look for. in nominees that I will support and confirm in the United States Senate. Folks who understand the Constitution, but not only understand it, who are champions in defending it, who are effective at articulating why the original meaning of the Constitution needs to be applied in the particular case that's before them, can be a leader on the court in defending the proper role of government. We've got to get back to that proper role of government, to think that our divinely inspired Constitution has been used by 9 justices in robes to say that we have a constitutional right to end the life of the most vulnerable among us, even when that child is inches away from taking his or her first breath. It breaks my heart. It is absolutely wrong. We've got to have folks on the Supreme Court who are going to defend life and are going to defend the Constitution.
So getting the judges right is an existential matter. We absolutely have to get them right. And for so long, Republicans have dropped the ball here, right? Have you noticed that when the left-wingers appoint justices, the justices get more left over time? Well, when Republican presidents appoint nominees, those justices tend to get left over time, right? And so the whole question here is, how do we get more Justice Alitos and Justice Thomases and less Justice Roberts, right? Do you remember David Souter? Souter was supposed to be a conservative stalwart, and he just became this moderate swing vote. And this is why I take this, and I want to be on the Judiciary Committee, I take that duty to advise and consent super seriously. I won't just be a rubber stamp for whatever the Federalist Society says. And I like the Federalist Society. In Stanford Law School, I was on the Federalist Society, but it's no longer just good enough to listen to whatever they say. When Josh Hawley objected to, I think Naomi Rao was a judge on the federal, or she was up for a nomination on the federal circuit, he said, I'm not so sure about this. She's got the FedSox stamp of approval, but she's not pro-life enough. And the Wall Street Journal and conservatives excoriated Hawley for that, but that's the kind of independent backbone you need to make sure that you put justices on that won't swim left over time.
I'm aware that some of you have a very bad angle, so I move back a little bit, but there are chairs throughout if you want to swing around and find a different spot. Luck of the draw, in fact, I'll move back a little bit, Cathi. Luck of the draw, this one comes, I'm not going to follow that. That would go viral. Luck of the draw, and I know how you're going to answer this because you have 9 kids, and I'm starting with you here, Justin. By the way, do they go to public school or private school?
There's a mix. We've got them in charter schools, we've got them in district schools, and we homeschool as well.
All right, so still a little blown away by that, but you better keep working. The public schools across the United States have failed parents in a systemic way in the last 2 years, and there are new activists all across the United States. One way out of this is for the federal government to provide a tax credit, a significant tax credit for private tuition that can be done through reconciliation. Would you support it? And at what level would you set that tax credit for private tuition per child?
Excellent question. Thank you, Hugh. You know, this is so critical. School choice is absolutely necessary. I've been a champion for school choice my entire life. You know, when I was in the state legislature, I actually introduced legislation that would have been a universal expansion of our education empowerment accounts that Center for Arizona Policy was a champion for. And this is something that I think it's a parental right. We are in charge of our children's education. Not like the left thinks. They think that we turn over power and authority of raising our children to them. And it's absolutely wrong. We've got to empower parents. We've all seen how critically important this is now because we see what the left is doing. They're introducing indoctrination into our district schools that is so offensive. You know, the critical race theory, teaching children to hate other children because of the color of their skin. This is wrong and it is offensive. It's stomping on the grave of Martin Luther King. I mean, he taught us that we should look upon the content of one's character, not on the color of one's skin. So I will 100% support every school choice measure that we can do, and it needs to be at the appropriate level so that they can take their student to a proper educational system for their kid.
Thank you. Blake, 30 support a tax credit? If so, at what level for private tuition for K through 12?
I would. I think that's a great idea. I would set the level pretty high. Maybe it's $7,500. I mean, we need to empower parents to send their kids wherever it makes sense. I think there should be a tax credit at the state or federal level for homeschooling, right? You pay into the system. It doesn't work for you. You want to homeschool your kid, but you don't get any of that money back. I think you should get the lion's share of that money back, right? On the margin, a lot more people would want to homeschool if they could afford it. Let's make that more affordable. The schools are outrageous right now. I just saw this video on Twitter yesterday. Some public school in Washington, D.C. had 4-year-olds marching around chanting with signs, Black Lives Matter. It's like, obviously the lives of black people matter, the lives of everybody matters, but like BLM, capital BLM, that's a basically this racial quasi-terrorist organization, and these kids are just getting indoctrinated, right? And I know that we spend so much time focused on this left-wing toxic ideology. I was the first candidate nationwide. I went on Tucker and called critical race theory anti-white racism. Right? I speak boldly and clearly about this issue, but the 1619 project that teaches kids to hate their country, critical race theory, this stuff is both a symptom and a driver of the dysfunction, but it's a symptom of just not teaching kids. We're not teaching kids to read, write. We're not teaching them anything about their history, and so this toxic crap fills the vacuum. School choice is the way out.
Follow-up, like BLM is quasi-terrorist?
Absolutely. Yeah, look at what happened in Minneapolis in the summer of 2020. It was BLM and Antifa activists burning down police precincts, and nothing happened to them. Not every member of BLM is a terrorist, but like a lot of them are, and they don't get arrested. And if they do get arrested, Kamala Harris's bail fund is there to bail them out. It's disgraceful.
General, back to my question about the $3,000, again, less applause, more questions. $3,000 minimum federal tax credit for private education, yes or no?
Would absolutely support it. I think the best way to pass legislation in that regard is to look at what the federal share is that's going into the states. Now, the thing I don't know is what every state is getting. Is it being adjudicated fairly across the 50 states? And that credit then goes back to the state and follows the child, and the parents are allowed to make that decision. I'll add, though, that the biggest issue that we face right now, as I've gone out on the trail, is, I said earlier, the radical left wants control of your children. Now listen, folks, we're going to raise an army of millions of voters that say, I pick Mick. That's what we're going to do. That is what we're going to do. How are we going to do it? Faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. But while you're pulling air here, you're talking about faith and hope every time you deploy. We cannot raise a generation of children that have two hopeless categories, victim or oppressor. That's called a failed state. We are not a defeated army. An army without hope is a defeated army. Hugh, the constitutional conservatives that love this nation and know this is the greatest country in the history of the world, we are not defeated, and we will prevail in 2022.
Let me change it just a bit for you, Jim. I'm a Virginian. We were just quasi-liberated by Glenn Youngkin's election. And public school unions have sued him successfully for one day, etc. Do we need the tuition tax credit? What are you going to do about public schools when you get, basically the collapse of credibility of half of the public schools in the country?
So guys, again, not as a politician or a business or a lobbyist, I'm a business guy, I'm a veteran, and I'm going big into D.C. This is no more time for footsie. There is this department of indoctrination up there that's something called education. It's got to go. It's got to be closed. Yes, tax credit's great, and I would certainly, if that comes across the desk, approve that. But guys, determination and action, and be bold, or otherwise we're not going to have a country. Those guys are indoctrinating kids, got to go. How do I earn your vote? And part of that is, even before, again, ever thought about being running for this office, is the support that I had given to those. Like Amanda Ray, for example, has stood up, represented parents, been bold about getting doxing. I've supported her and rallied with her and have her endorsement. Same with Marissa Hamilton, who stood up and said, we're going to go out and recruit folks to run for school board and get our schools back. I have her endorsement, and now spending money with her to train those parents in how to win in those cases. So guys, I'm a man of action. And by golly, I'm going to do everything I can to get education back locally and have the dollars in the state follow the kid, not come from Washington to get recycled.
Next question. The Equality Act and Fairness for All are congressional proposals that would add add sexual orientation, gender identity to federal non-discrimination law. Would you vote for either or both of these bills? Why or why not? And we will start with, who are we at now? We'll start with Blake.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I actually didn't catch it. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yes, congressional proposals called Equality Act, Fairness for All, would add sexual orientation and gender identity to federal non-discrimination law. Would you vote for either or both of those bills? Why or why not?
No, I don't think so. I would not. Anytime there's something called the Equality and Fairness for All Act, you know, you can kind of, your spidey sense should be tingling, right? It's like, what if there's the Free Puppies and Unicorns Act? It's probably this ghastly left-wing plot. Look, I don't support discrimination. Like, I don't have a problem with gay people. None of you do either, right? We don't want to be bludgeoned over the head with some agenda, right? The Starbucks cup doesn't have to turn rainbow for 2 months. You know, we don't need military recruitment commercials that are talking about finding your trans identity within the military. But like, we're fine with gay people, right? What we don't want to do is allow the left to weaponize the civil rights bureaucracy and get in and start telling you how you need to run your business. You know, look at the bakery, right? I mean, the bakery is the perfect case here. Here's a baker, he is a believer, he's a man of Christian faith, and he was willing to bake a cake for this gay couple, but he wasn't willing to write a certain message about their gay marriage that conflicted with his religious beliefs. The left wants to come in and steamroll over that baker's right? They want to call him a racist and a bigot and evil. And no, he's just a guy trying to make it and exercise his religious freedom. We need to protect that religious freedom, and I think the Equality Act would steamroll it.
Yeah, Cathi, I would not vote for the Equality and Fairness Act because it's just the opposite. Now, I will tell you, I am most concerned about that for the clear infringement of religious liberties protected by the First Amendment. And I have real proof of this. On February 4th, after Biden was sworn in, he promulgated a memo that said we had a 60-day window to stand down every military member and talk about extremism in the ranks. Now, for my previous 38 years, I had never once adjudicated a case, 14 years in command, for insider threat or extremism, but now this was the number one thing. It is now morphed into the Department of the Navy en bloc denying every religious exception for a vaccine mandate. Yet when I was the commanding general of the National Guard, I adjudicated 3 cases for White Mountain Apache tribal members that had a deeply held religious belief about hair length. And we approved that, but today, we are going to say en bloc, all religious exceptions are out. Everyone should fear that. Everyone should fear that.
Equality Act, Fairness for All.
Yeah, thank you for that question. No, I would oppose both.
Sorry, I said Jim. I'm sorry, I didn't say.
North brother. So guys, absolutely the answer is no, we're not supporting. You know, there's a man and there's a woman. I think that's pretty straightforward. As Blake said, we don't want to discriminate. That's a leftist tactic to push back on us. We're all Americans, American citizens. We've got to go bigger and bolder though, guys. Yes, vote it down, no, but then get back focused on the real issues around this country. And one is, from a military standpoint, that's being used, as Mick said, to push warriors out of our military. We have a debacle that happened in Afghanistan, and Austin and Milley at DOE and Mark Kelly complicit with Biden, killing, murdering 13 warriors. And now they're pushing out real men and women who want to fight for this country over the stuff that they're doing and wokeism and using anything they can. We must be a lethal weaponry, and no one should fear, or everyone should fear our military so they don't come here or threaten our allies, just as they're doing in Ukraine and Taiwan. Guys, we're precipitously close to losing this country, and we better start getting back to real big things and pushing hard and being on the offense in D.C. I'll take the fight to them when you give me that chance.
Justin.
Thank you. I was too excited to answer this question earlier, but no, we absolutely have got to fight against the woke agenda, and that's what these 2 bills represent. And unlike everyone else on this stage, I actually have a record on this issue as well. In the state legislature, I defended religious freedom. I spoke against and advocated for protecting our religious rights. And like Blake said, none of us thinks that we should discriminate. We should love everybody. But that's not what these bills are about. These bills are about the thought police. It's about taking over our religious liberties. And we've got to make sure that we protect our young women. We've got to make sure that we don't have men in private spaces and that we protect women's sports. Men should not be competing in women's sports. When I was in the state legislature, Phoenix passed a bill to authorize men into the private spaces in corporate, in any business. It was telling businesses that they had to allow men into these private spaces, into gym, dressing rooms, into bathrooms. And we passed legislation to stop that overreach of that municipal government. And we saw the outreach and the outcry from the radical left. In addition, I was a champion of Senate Bill 1060 that you guys all remember. And I stood and advocated for these religious freedoms and actually stood up and spoke to CNN and told them why they were wrong. And this is not about discrimination, it's about protecting the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Thank you. In the Senate, national security matters, whether or not you're on armed services, so my next few questions will be national security related. The favorite question from the 2016 presidential debates that I did, General, I'll start with you, was on the nuclear triad. President Trump particularly liked that. He's reminded me of it a few times. Which part of the triad do we need to reinforce most rapidly if you are a member of the Senate? Where will the money go?
We have not invested in critical infrastructure in either ICBM fleet and the sustainment of our bases that house the bombers since the 1950s. And I can tell you that as a guy that served 38 years in the Air Force. Deterrence and peace through strength is a real thing. President Trump, as was Reagan, was right about following on with Teddy Roosevelt. Speak softly and carry a big stick. We are in the situation we are in today, Hugh, because Biden was sworn in. He immediately shut off the oil. He gave Putin increased leverage in Eastern Europe. Subsequently, Hamas began bombing Israel. Kabul collapsed. China moved in to the Taiwan Straits, and now you're seeing what's happening in the Ukraine. And the problem we have, Hugh, is we cannot protect shopping malls in Chicago and San Francisco, so do these guys take us seriously? This is failed leadership. That's why I'm sending Kelly and Biden out of there. Kelly first, Biden in 2024. They're gone.
General, is that ICBM first?
ICBM, sustainment, capability, silo, and next generation technology is what's most lacking.
That was the Air Force guy for the ICBMs. Jim, you're the Army guy.
So we got to get the politics out of the military. We need lethal warriors in the general ranks. None of this anymore about politicians deciding what they need. They have to decide, and their mission is to be the most lethal force on this planet so that no one ever comes here or threatens our allies. So it's what they need is what they get. Now, I'm not endless spending in a Pentagon. They got work to do too. We got to get back to lethality and not wokeism. So when they say which thing they need to upgrade, that's what they should get if we've got the right people in there. Obama cleansed the ranks of great generals. Biden's been doing the same thing. Maybe all the generals need to go, and we need to go find those great full colonels that will stand up again and have the guts to stand up for America and for its rights. So, I'll get deep in that, of course I will, but we have got to get politics, we get the government out of everything that they're screwing up. I've never been in anything in my business career or my military career where the government did anything better than those that were supposed to be in charge of it could do. Let them do it. Trust them and support them.
Follow up, which part of the triad gets the most funding?
Whatever the warrior in the Air Force, Navy, nuclear guys tell me, that's what they need. I'm getting every politician the hell out of the way and go support what they need.
Okay, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Mr. Lamon on that point as well. I think that we need to look to our experts in the military, and we need the most powerful fighting force on the face of the earth. You know, that's what we learned from President Reagan. President Reagan defeated communism without firing a shot, through peace, through strength. And that's what we need when we've had failed leadership under the Biden administration. And that's why we see these tyrants around the world, and they recognize that weakness, and they see that weakness, and they are able to be aggressors because we are not projecting strength. We need our enemies to fear us and our allies to respect and trust us. And we've got to fund the technology to be able to take on China. I mean, China has tested these hypersonic glided missiles that can evade our missile defense systems. We've got to make sure that we have the best technology available so that we can ensure that we are the strongest country on the face of the earth, and we can defeat any hostilities that come towards us so that we don't have to put our young men and women in harm's way.
So follow up. The Joint Chiefs sit there and they all say, we got it right, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Are they correct? Does one of those parts of the triad need more right now?
No, absolutely. I would support the experts in the military, these generals, and if they're saying that's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, I'm comfortable with that.
Blake.
If I had to pick, one part of the triad, it'd be ICBMs. That really where we're falling behind here. I mean, you just mentioned, Justin, China successfully tested hypersonic nuclear missile delivery systems, and I don't actually think that got enough coverage. Like, that's a breathtaking failure for the U.S. military and for U.S. intelligence. Like, China has this capability, we don't. That's a huge problem. I wouldn't just stop worrying there, though. It's like I'm worried about our Navy. China has more ships than we do. They have more battleships than we do now. Their ships are an average age of 11 years old. Our ships, average age 22 years old. You see some of these photos, our ships have rust on them. That China sees those photos. This is embarrassing. But then you also have to worry about space. China right now is building a next generation space station. It's not for private civilian exploration of space, right? They want to shoot our satellites out of the sky. Meanwhile, our International Space Station is almost going to be decommissioned. Like, it's only got a few more cycles. We'll cobble it together with duct tape, but China is investing in these technologies, and if they can successfully knock our satellites out of space, that's it. The whole modern economy runs on these satellites. We are behind, and it's because we have woke politics and unserious people leading at the top levels of the DoD right now.
Cathi? Okay. Second question for you on national security, Afghanistan, and I'm going to go in reverse order and begin with you, Blake. We have thousands of men and women who fought alongside our troops that we have abandoned. Will you forget them, or will you continue to insist that they be made an object of American foreign policy to get to this country?
Sorry, which people?
The SIVs, the people who are interpreters, and the families of the interpreters in Afghanistan.
Look, I think we should take care of the interpreters, but that's not what Biden did. They said, we need to take care of the interpreters, and then they imported like 200,000 random Afghans that didn't have enough security clearance. Many of these people are disappeared into the interior of our country committing crimes, some against children. So yeah, take care of the interpreters, get them a house or something, but they don't all need to become American citizens, and Biden is incompetent. He couldn't vet these people. I'm glad that we're out of Afghanistan. I thought we were there for far too long. It was basically 20 years of lies. The left-wing generals at the top, they lied to President Trump, they lied to Obama, they lied to George W. Bush before them, right? Victory's right around the corner, sir. We have a new strategic plan. We're going to turn Afghanistan into a Western liberal democracy. Well, no, you weren't, right? That was a lie. And so while I'm glad that we're not going to be in Afghanistan for a whole century, I will never forgive Biden for the way that he got out. Because it was just grossly incompetent. It was humiliating on the world stage. They did it from Kabul instead of Bagram. They gave Bagram to the Chinese. You give billions of dollars in equipment to the Taliban, right? They sell all those helicopters to Iran and China. And it cost the lives of those 13 service members. So I'm glad that we're out, but the way he got out was humiliating. China smells blood in the water, and this is the consequence of weak American leadership.
General, the SIVs in Afghanistan.
The SIVs in Afghanistan were a critical part of our team. There's also American citizens trapped there. There is nothing moral or ethical about our withdrawal. I tell people all the time, I took an oath to defend the Constitution, to follow and promulgate legal, moral, ethical orders. While it's legal to turn Bagram Air Base back over to the sovereign, there's nothing moral or ethical about it if you know even one citizen is left behind. If it's your mom, your brother, your nephew, there's nothing moral or ethical about it. And those people that helped us, and I know this, I was a wartime adjutant general for 8 years. No one takes more seriously the idea of putting young men and women in harm's way than I. It is challenging for me to deploy and be in the largest daylight raid since 1945 on January 19th, 1991, but it's even more difficult to face the families of those young men and women, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. There's clandestine ways we can help get them out, but we cannot forget them.
Justin.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, what happened in Afghanistan was an absolute disaster. And it was because of the failed leadership of the Biden administration. We've got to make sure that we stand with those who stood with us. We cannot leave American citizens behind. So we've got to do everything that we can to keep the honor of the United States of America. And that includes doing everything that we can to get American citizens out, and then properly vetting everybody who was an ally in assisting the armed forces in Afghanistan. But then next, we need to learn from the past. We should not be engaging in nation building. We should not be engaging in military adventurism. We've got to protect our young men and our young women, and we've got to build up our armed forces so that through that strength, we do not have to put them in harm's way ever again. Thank you.
Jim.
The debacle in Afghanistan is one of the darkest moments in modern American history. The military was told to stand aside, and the State Department was put in charge by people like Biden, Milley, Austin at DOD, and Mark Kelly, 100% complicit. I know this, my daughter-in-law's brother was there. Those officers, those young officers, did not want to get on the planes because American citizens were still there. Our junior ranks are still solid to the core in America. Those have got to be supported. Austin and Milley got to go. I'm after their jobs, at least when we get there to D.C. Guys, these American citizens that are still there, who knows how many, because the fake media will not tell us. We've got to get them out and go there and do that. I caught a lot of heat when I said no to bringing Afghanistan people here. Let's take them to neighboring Muslim countries where they have their own same culture. I'm sorry, guys, being an interpreter is not a lotto ticket to American citizenship. You can get the help because you helped us. We'll get you in a neighboring country, and then maybe over time you can go back and take your country back. But we're seeing it right here in Scottsdale, and that should not be happening.
Thank you, Cathi, is allowing you to continue to run with national security, so let's turn to the People's Republic of China. Justin, the genocide games got underway last night. I'm not watching, I'm not sure if you are. Would you explain your understanding of the nature of the PRC regime?
Absolutely. You know, China is a threat to the entire world. And what we've seen is we've seen the leaders in academia, we've seen the leaders in the Democrat Party, and far too often even in the Republican Party, kowtow to China and do everything that China wants in order to have the influence that they want to be able to send their corporations, in order to send their academics to study there. We've got to have bold leaders in government, in the business world, and in our schools that are going to say no to what's going on in China. They are abusing human rights, and yet we pretend like there is nothing wrong with cooperating with this communist government. They are a threat to our national security. As I've mentioned, they've already tested hypersonic glided missiles that can evade our missile defense systems. So we've got to be tough on China. The free world needs to stand up and say, look, we cannot stand for these human rights abuses, and we've got to make sure that they stop manipulating their currency to take advantage of our free trade at the detriment to American workers. We've got to do everything we can to be tough on China and reassert American exceptionalism in the world.
Wait, the nature of the CCP and the regime.
It's right there in the name, the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. It is a communist totalitarian state. China is, to a first approximation, the geopolitical rival. And we're in a cold war with them, right? We all pray it doesn't turn hot someday, but we're in a cold war with them, and we will be for decades. This is going to be the struggle of civilizations this century. It's been a bipartisan failure for 30 years. You know, it's forgivable to be a little bit nice to China during the Cold War. Vis-a-vis the Soviets, it made sense to try to help China. But as soon as we won, it was naive for George H.W. Bush to pursue this liberalizing policy, right? And then Clinton, and then Bush again, and then Obama. They just had this conceit that if we help China industrialize, well, surely China will become a Western liberal democracy like us, right? No, just the opposite happened. Actually, China ate our lunch, and we've become remarkably remarkably more oligarchic and stratified. And we're seeing this quasi-totalitarianism take root right here in the United States. We're becoming more like China, not the other way around. And we have to fight them. And this is why, I mean, China, look, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's easy to exoticize and romanticize it. But they take a long view. They take a long view. Most Republicans are just stumbling to block whatever the Democrats are doing this week. We need to take a long view and figure out how to meet China in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
And Jim. Because when I served in the military, the Soviet Union was called the enemy, and we treated them as such. Communist Chinese Party could not be clearer. They have a 100-year plan, they show it, they advertise it, and they're ahead of it. What part of that equation do we not get? They want this country. They need to be out of our schools, out of our universities, out of our businesses, out of our stock market. Go home, go do your own communist thing there. This is America, and you get no part of it. Part of it. And guys, strategically, we're being sold out by politicians. Lobbyist dollars, a lot of it comes from Soros and the Communist Chinese Party. And it's in the Republicans too, because I'm a fighter. I want Communist Chinese Party out of this country. It's going to be tough for a little while because we've become so dependent. Because we have the minerals and rare earth in this country. And for the few that we don't, we've got Canada and Mexico and our neighboring countries. We've got to start doing that. Re-put American manufacturing here, mining and energy dominance, and cut off their leverage and become a proud, bold America again.
We're talking a lot of issues. Let's shift tack a little bit. Name one life experience that you see as qualifying you in particular to be a United States Senator.
Big in business, not being a politician, not being a lawyer, having to meet a payroll every day, having a balanced budget and build companies on no debt. Because I'm a humble beginning farm boy from Alabama who's worked his way up and been very blessed by a great Lord, a great country, and great parents. In doing that, I rose from a site engineer after 6 years military. I went into private business, 6 years of military, and then used that into private business. Rose from site engineer to president. We then, of a large engineering construction company in the power industry, we then built that into the second largest in the country, only behind back to 42,000 people. Then started my own business here in Arizona in the power industry. In 8 years, we built it to $1 billion, 1,700 American jobs, 22% veterans. We gave 10% of our net income to the most needy. We bought American first. Guys, I've seen the federal government screw up everything they touch, from education to business to you name it. I am going as a warrior to D.C. If you want cutesy, don't vote for me. If you want somebody going to stand up for you and your kids and grandkids and get this country back, I'm your guy.
I would say serving on the Trump transition team. This was a 3-month boot camp in real politics. You know, I've been a political person my whole life. My parents were Reagan Republicans. I was a Ron Paul Republican. I've been paying attention. But this 3 months that I spent in Trump Tower, I was working with Steve Bannon, I was working with Don Jr., I was working with Jared Kushner, and the president-elect. I learned a whole lot about how it actually works. Right? I saw the beast face to face. I saw the left-wing resistance in the administrative state, right, the deep state. Congress hasn't done its job for decades, and so we've got these giant agencies nominally under the control of the president. But I saw the resistance, and I saw how deep that goes, right? Drain the swamp, yeah, but I saw firsthand the swamp was like 5 or 6 times deeper than we all thought. And so I know how to navigate it. I also saw this sort of Republican rhino resistance, right? As soon as President Trump won, you had a different perspective on this. I had my internal perspective. There were an awful lot of Republican light or rhino forces that kind of glommed on. You know, you have Reince Priebus in the transition. He thought he was in charge. Chris Christie, Rudy Giuliani, VP-elect Pence was there, right? He thought he was in charge. So it was this real clear-eyed, bare-knuckle education in politics. And now I know what we're up against. I know how to get to DC, cut through the noise, and actually get stuff done.
General, Nick?
My life experience is predicated on the oath of office that I'm going to take on January 3rd, 2023. It's the same oath I've been under until April 10th of last year. And I said this Every one of you knows this. This election is not about money. This election is not about anything other than understanding this country is the greatest in the history of the world. And it's worth saving. And when I say I take an oath, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I can tell you right now in this country, just because you served in the military doesn't make you a greater candidate, although it does allow me to understand a lot about the defense appropriation process, reconciliation, and a lot of the other things that happen with 50% of the appropriated dollars. But the medical workers, the teachers, our police and firefighters, our truckers, the first group we supported when the pandemic hit, you're contributing to this nation as well. And that's why I'm out there. 30,000 miles in 7 months, an event in all 15 counties. Every citizen in this room understands this. Arizona is copper miners, cattle growers, cotton farmers. That's what we are, and we're going to continue to be.
Justin.
Well, I've got a lot of experience that qualifies me well, but there's one thing that I'll highlight. In addition to being the CFO for Turning Point USA and recently resigning in order to run, where I've been in the trenches fighting the good fight to teach our rising generation to love our country, to love its founding, to defend the Constitution. In addition to being a father of 9, someone who loves his family and wants to make sure that we pass on a strong country to our kids and our grandkids. In addition to being a native of Arizona with family history going back 6 generations, I've actually been in the fight. I've been in the arena. In 2010, Obama was our president. We had too big to fail. We had bailouts of corporations. We had the unprecedented budget crisis here in Arizona, a $3.6 billion deficit. And what did our state legislature do? Well, they passed a record property tax increase, a record sales tax increase. They sold the state capital and debt financed it back for many years into the future just to pay the salaries and benefits of that year. And I said, this is wrong. Arizonans have been hit hard by the Great Recession. We should not be asking them to do more to support their government. I ran on a platform of cutting your budgets, of balancing the budgets, cutting your taxes, getting Arizona back to work. I've got a proven conservative record. I defunded Planned Parenthood, defunded Obamacare, and that's what I'll do in the United States Senate. I'll champion secure borders, the right to life, and the Second Amendment.
Very important topic, Andy. 2 rounds here, possibly. We cannot lose supercomputing and artificial intelligence with the Chinese. We cannot lose that. At the same time, Americans are worried about big tech and their omnipresence in our lives and our privacy. So what is the solution for the big tech quandary where we don't surrender the advantages we must have by the concentration of talent, but we also don't lose our freedom? And Blake, that's your world, so I'm starting with you.
Yeah, it's actually a false dichotomy. The big tech is not actually at all related to quantum. It's not related to the advances we need to be making. Innovation actually happens in small companies and startups, right? Google and Facebook at this point, they're just giant stagnant monopolies. They're not innovative. And that's a big problem. I think big tech is an existential threat to this country. I really do. We can talk about Dominion voting systems and what happened at the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. We should. But I think Facebook threw the election for Biden weeks before anybody even voted, right? Biden had that, Hunter Biden's got a lot of problems. His nefarious business dealings, right? That's the euphemism of the century, how about that? And the New York Post wrote about this, right? There's emails and text messages, 10% to the big guy. Well, who's the big guy? Could it be Joe Biden? The New York Post wrote about that. They published in October of 2020. Facebook and Twitter decided that was misinformation. They scrubbed it from their platform, and so dozens of millions of Americans fewer got to read about that. In the weeks before the election, if you know anything about how big tech and media manipulation and media headlines move minds, that's hundreds of thousands of votes right there. Well, the official margin in Arizona was 10,500. Out of the swing states, the official margin was 100,000. Facebook, by that one act of corporate censorship, threw the election for Biden. We live in a banana republic if we let big multinational corporations get away with that stuff.
Jim, big tech.
First, we've got to get China out of this country so they stop stealing. Let's get it back to where it's an American company, not American Chinese. Get their investments out because they're stealing that technology so that our quantum computing, all of our work that we do, leads to advances in American lifestyle and American military and aren't stolen. Again, China is an enemy, not an adversary. Get them out, protect that. As a business guy, I hire dozens of engineers a month. I can assure you there are engineers in this country that are great. ASU produces a lot of great engineers. We can do this ourselves and let them and have them not keep stealing our secrets. Lobbyist dollars are corruptive, and I'm the only candidate up here, guys, that has sworn that off, so I don't owe anyone. No one can buy me. I do not want China in our country. It's just the fact of life. They're an enemy. When it comes to the view of the world, yeah, it's going to be tough for a little while, but we've got to be able to do this ourselves and not depend on those guys. In big tech, absolutely. Had to be broken up. The First Amendment was not based on an exception for the internet, okay? Those guys are very smart. When they founded that Constitution, all debate should be open and not be censored, as I have been.
General, is it that easy? Can we break up big tech without hurting national security?
Well, your question was about AI, and I'm going to go back for a minute to your question about the triad. Many of you remember when Reagan talked about Star Wars and not weaponizing space. The real deficiency is in our defensive systems. While we need offensive capability with ICBMs, submarines, and the rest, the challenges we face right now with big tech, in my opinion, is we cannot stifle the innovative spirit of our country. Now, I'm not a tech guy. I'm an F-16 guy. I made the trees big and small, and I put warheads on foreheads. That's what I did. But as a non-tech guy, I can tell you this. The Bill of Rights and our Constitution has all the answers. The answer to suppressed speech is not pushing it into the sad shadows of censorship. It's more speech. And these companies that violate that need to be sanctioned, fined, and we need big guardrails up, a digital Bill of Rights. You should be able to determine what data you share with any provider. But they are abusing our ignorance, but we can't lose our competitive edge.
Justin.
Yeah, we've got to take on big tech. I mean, what happened in this last election, it should never happen again. And it's about free markets. You know, in reality, what we saw is a competitor to Twitter rise up in Parler. And what happened? Well, big tech colluded and shut it down. And they had the power to do that. We've got to use our existing laws, our existing antitrust laws. We've got to use Section 230. Big tech, social media relies on the immunity that's granted to them through Section 230 because they claim to be a bulletin board. They're not publishing. They're not curating content. Does anybody believe that? Absolutely not. We saw that in this last election when they buried the Hunter Biden story in order to influence the election. We've got to use every tool in the toolbox to make sure that we have free markets and that we have the ability to have free speech, take on big tech, and stop this from happening.
So, Cathi, China, give me the follow-up. On Russia and China, conflicts are about to involving cyber capability. To what level should the United States directly engage Russia in the defense of Ukraine or China in the defense of Taiwan? Justin.
That's a great question. And this gets back to the points that I was making previously, is that what we have right now is a failure of leadership. We need stronger leadership in the White House. We saw what happened with Ronald Reagan. We saw what happened with President Trump. When we have strong leaders, then we can stop this aggression from happening across the world. When we project weakness, then we see our enemies advancing and taking these actions that they would never dare under a strong leader like Ronald Reagan or President Trump. So we've got to continue to build up our military. We've got to continue to invest in technology. We've got to make sure that we have peace through strength so that we don't have to put our young men and young women in harm's way. And we've got to make sure that we support our alliances. We've got to be strong and stand with NATO, but we've got to do everything in our power to not have to commit troops.
Would you use American force though in a cyber way against Russia or China in the defense of Ukraine or Taiwan?
So I think that the cyberspace battle that's waging right now is something that we absolutely have to be engaged in. This is the battle of the 21st century, and we've got to make sure that we have the technology, that we have the ability to block these attacks coming from China that can shut down our power grid, that can stop our economy. We've got to engage in it. We've got to make sure that we have the advantage because we've invested in the security of our country.
Jim.
6-year military veteran, paratrooper officer. I served in the Cold War, saw communism up front, close and personal. Guys, I am not for 1 minute ever going to vote to put my son or yours on the front lines of Ukraine to spill American blood for Ukraine. I am not for endless wars. I would sell Ukraine every offensive, defensive weapon that they want. They're going to pay for it. European Union might have to help them. But they need to fight their battles over there with our support, not with our troops. It's American blood. It's your kids that defend this country. Look at our southern border. We're talking about Ukraine's border. We got an invasion going on. 42,000 a week coming through this border. Guys, with Brandon and team, I talk to him every other day. 42,000. Be scared to death. You should be. These are not humanitarian cases. I've stood there with Brandon and watched military-age males from Uzbekistan coming through by the dozens. I hit the weight room every morning. These guys are bigger and bulkier than I am. They're ready to take on this country. We need to wake up and defend our own country and help allies with projection of strength and lethality.
That was a no on Ukraine. What about Chinese ships sailing for Taiwan? Would you let
Great
me
thing.
think that?
Ditto. I am not putting American troops in Taiwan. I want to put the fleet over. We want to sell them every weapon. They're a rich country. They want to buy anything from us. All in. Help themselves. We want to put the fleet out there, and if China comes onto their shore and they want to pay for our missiles from the ships in the sky to land on their soil, on Taiwan, all in.
All right, thank you. General.
Yeah, Hugh, the question I think was about cyber intrusion in an offensive capacity. Yes. Now I can tell all of you, this is a very, very, very challenging space. But I can also tell you that the NSA needs to be closely overwatched because I'm concerned about what they do in the interior of the country. But I can tell all of you to maintain confidence. When the hackers on the other side are even 3/5 our capability, I'll be worried. They have very significant offensive capabilities to disrupt the Chinese and the Russians. Very significant. But it requires United States senators that understand what that means, how that can be turned against you, and someone that can hold them to account. But yes, that is the quickest way to control things in the South China Sea. Ukraine is slightly different because you have a land border and the ability for the Russians to try to put a boot on the throat. So they're going to need kinetic weapons, money, and we have to have a deliberate and distinct debate about what our interests are and why we are there, if at all.
Blake.
We are absolutely already engaged in electronic warfare, right? Cold War with China, electronic warfare with Russia already. It's something we need to continue to be engaged on. I agree we have the superiority right now, and I worry that we're losing it. You know, you've seen the CIA recruitment commercial where it's all about, I am Latinx. This is my CIA. I am a woman with anxiety, and it's like, that itself is like a Russian or Chinese psyop, right? Like, that's not what the CIA should be focused on. The NSA and CIA have a lot of work to do, and I think China in particular is developing these electronic capabilities that on the current clip will put us to shame in 5 or 10 years. I worry a lot about that. I agree with Jim, and I care so much more about our southern border with Mexico than the Ukrainian-Russian border, right? It's insane that we are sending troops right now to defend the sanctity of the Ukraine border with Russia. Presidents have started wars before to distract from their domestic failures and query whether that's what Biden is up to right now. The Ukraine does not pose as much of a strategic interest to the United States as Taiwan does. I agree with Justin that the Chinese are salivating over Taiwan right now, and they might move after the Olympics because they smell blood in the water. That is so dangerous, but we cannot let them take Taiwan. If they do, Taiwan has all of the chip-making capacity. They make all the best computer chips in the world. We need to get Taiwan independent, but we cannot let China take Taiwan. And God willing, God praying they won't do it. I get it, sorry. Everyone gets one, okay? Everyone gets one.
That's Hugh's rules, once again. Last question, back on domestic policy. Any concerns about a renewed push in Congress to ratify an Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution? And I'll start with Jim.
Sorry, hold on a second.
Any concerns about a renewed push in the United States Congress to ratify an Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution?
Yes, we've got all the amendments to the Constitution that we need at this point. I think this country is doing a disservice to not focus on the things that we got to fix now. We don't need more things to fix. we're all in for equal opportunity in business. You know, my company, 1,700 jobs are created here in Arizona. We look just like America. 32% Latino, etc. Great company in terms of women and men. And we got along fantastic. Became the second fastest growing private energy company in the country. Because we got serious problems in this country. And if we don't fix it, and you don't send a fighter to DC, guys, we're not gonna have a country. That's my concern. Because I'm optimistic. I served in military Carter, and when Reagan came in, boom, the optimism, the motivation of the troops skyrocketed. I see the same thing. We got a beautiful opportunity that starts in Arizona because we are one of the most competitive seats in U.S. Senate. And guys, I will be a warrior on that Senate floor for America First agenda and no to anything. If we need to say no, I'll say no, and I'll give cover to other conservatives because you need somebody that's going to fight.
Light Equal Rights Amendment.
I can think of a few amendments that we need. I'd like a balanced budget amendment. I'd like a term limits amendment. I can think of a few good ones to add. But I don't think we need an equal rights amendment. Again, the Free Puppies and Dolphins and Unicorns and Everything Good Act. The Equality Act, you suspect it's not about equality. The Equal Rights Act, you suspect it's not about equal rights. Thank goodness Phyllis Schlafly, kicked this to the curb decades ago. Look, women are not paid less in America than men. It's a left-wing narrative, this gender pay gap. When you control for the occupations, when you control for people taking time out to, birth children, things are actually pretty equal. And men do the most dangerous jobs. Men are the ones who are the police officers. Not all of it, but 80% of it in this country. Men are the ones who are doing risky, fishing, crab fishing in Alaska. And sometimes those jobs pay more. Sometimes those jobs pay more, and so I think we got to push back on the fake left-wing narrative that women don't have equal rights in this country. I want women to have equal rights, but we don't need an equal rights amendment that would actually just be a Trojan horse to give the government more power to implement Kamala Harris's national gender strategy, right? This is what the left does, and we have to resist it.
Yeah, I would not support using political capital on equal rights amendment the first day. Our priority is the southwest border, funding for that border, securing the wall, protecting your Second Amendment, and overturning Roe. Everything else is a states' rights issue. Now, you said this was our last question, so I want to say thank you to you and all the people and everybody watching online today. And I want to reinforce again this message of hope. We will prevail. We will defeat Mark Kelly and the radical left in 2022. The energy is real. The energy is real. Everywhere I go, there's mass turnout. But how do you do it? How are we going to win, General? What's the path? The path is for every one of you to grab 10 more. I served in the second oldest position in our government for 8 years. First Adjutant General, 1636. 1636. We raised an army of citizens to win independence from tyranny of King George. We are going to raise an army of voters that say, I pick Mick. I pick Mick. That's it. And we are going to send Mark Kelly back to space. That's what we're doing.
Justin, Equal Rights Amendment.
I do not think that we need the Equal Rights Amendment. This is about protecting abortion, and we should not support it. We don't need it. There are already protections in the Constitution, and we do need some other amendments, like the Balanced Budget Amendment. We need a Term Limits Amendment. And when I get to the United States Senate, my priorities are going to be border security, election integrity, and the economy. And I'll tell you what I'll introduce when I get to the United States Senate. The first bill that I'll introduce is a bill to secure our borders, to make permanent the Remain in Mexico policy, to build the wall, to finish the wall, to properly fund our border security, to create an E-Verify requirement for employers. My second bill will be a bill that says we're going to protect the integrity of our election. We're going to allow states to put in place voter identification mandates for every ballot that's cast. My third bill will be a bill that says, look, we do not need the government over-intrusive in our lives. And I see that far too much from the federal government. So what I'm going to do is introduce a bill to abolish the IRS. My fourth bill will be a bill that's going to be modeled after after the great patriots in Texas, it will be the heartbeat bill. My fifth bill will be a bill to say we've got to get the federal government back to the limited constitutional role. And it will say we're going to eliminate all federal government activity that is not authorized under the enumerated powers of the Constitution. And I'll get it done.
I want to thank you all. We have 1 minute. I have a bonus 10-second question. It's an either or. You're a 5-star Arizona football player. You're going out of state, either to the past, Nick Saban, Alabama, or to the future, Ryan Day in Ohio State. Which way do you go, Justin? Ohio State or Alabama?
University of Texas.
That's right. I'm going for Arizona.
General?
I sent him to Baylor. I got 2 kids down there.
Blake?
I'm a Tucson guy, University of Arizona.
Hey. And Jim, you're from Alabama, so you don't know anything about football.
Sick bird.
Played 2 years coach, linebacker. Guys know something about bringing the heat, going to the Senate, roll tide, and let's go Arizona.
Thank you for joining me and thanking our candidates. Great conversation.
Be back here at 10 minutes. We will start sharply at 10:15. Thank you.